November 27th, 2013. Arena Corinthians. A World Cup construction site valued at $500 million, a 2,185-ton crane, and a single keystone truss. A few silent millimeters in the soaked ground. Then, in seconds, the boom buckled. A 500-ton mass plummeted, and 2 workers lost their lives. Officially, it was called an accident under deadline pressure. But behind these crushed lives and shattered steel, a deeper system of hidden shortcuts and silent warnings starts to emerge. The real cost of Brazil's World Cup disaster begins here. A crane of this scale is an engineering marvel, 2,185 tons, with a boom stretching 102 meters, designed to lift steel roof sections heavier than a fully loaded Boeing 747. On November 27, 2013, it prepared for its 38th lift, a keystone truss weighing between 420 and 500 tons. The crane's tracks rested on soil saturated by days of heavy rain. At this size, even the smallest shift beneath its base becomes catastrophic. A few millimeters of ground movement, barely enough to notice underfoot, translates into meters of displacement at the boom tip. The geometry is unforgiving. The longer the boom, the greater the amplification. When the base tilts, the top swings wide, multiplying the effect by a factor of hundreds. The load path from the suspended truss down through the boom, car body, and into the ground depends entirely on stable footing. If the ground yields even slightly, the crane's structure faces forces it was never meant to absorb. That day, the saturated subsoil beneath the tracks compressed unevenly. The boom, extended to its maximum, became a lever arm amplifying the tiniest shift. The result was that the lower chords of the lattice boom buckled under the sudden off-axis load. In a fraction of a second, the entire structure lost integrity. The boom folded, the truss dropped, and hundreds of tons of steel crashed into the stadium's east seating bowl. No mechanical defect was found. No operator error could be blamed. The collapse was a textbook case of geometric amplification, how a silent, invisible change at ground level can unleash forces powerful enough to snap engineered steel. The entire safety of the operation hinged on the assumption that the ground would hold. Without continuous monitoring and adjustment for soil conditions, that assumption becomes a fatal gamble. In this world, millimeters matter. When the ground moves, the machine follows, and at this scale the consequences are immediate and absolute. Fabio Luis Pereira spent that morning in his truck, waiting for the crane crew to finish the lift. He was 42, a driver for BHM Monk, working long shifts to support his wife and children in Sao Paulo. When the truss crashed down, Fabio never had a chance. The debris flattened his cab in seconds. His family received the news by phone, a sudden absence that would never be filled. Ronaldo Oliveira dos Santos was 44, a mounting technician for Conecta. He had just finished lunch, found a quiet spot in a nearby truck, and dozed off. It was supposed to be a brief rest before returning to work. When the steel and concrete fell, Ronaldo was killed instantly. His body was sent more than 2,000 kilometers north to Fortaleza, so his family could hold a proper burial. The journey home was paid for by the company, but no payment could measure the loss. Both men were among nearly 1,700 workers on site that day. Most were on break, scattered across the unfinished stadium, eating, resting, waiting for the next shift. The collapse happened just after noon, a time when the project's relentless pace paused only briefly for lunch. The pressure on the site was relentless. FIFA's official deadline loomed just weeks away, December 31st, 2013. Construction schedules stretched into 7-day work weeks, with overtime the norm and vacations postponed. Every day lost to weather or technical delay brought new warnings from above. The stadium had to be ready, no matter the cost. After the funerals, families entered months of negotiation with Odebrecht and Corinthians. Legal teams and union representatives argued over responsibility and compensation. In April 2014, a settlement was reached, but the details were hidden behind court orders. No public statement, no disclosure of amounts, just a sealed agreement, and a silence enforced by the labor court in October 2015. For the families, the only certainty was absence. For the site, the work resumed. The rush to meet the deadline continued. The loss of Fabio and Ronaldo folded into the daily rhythm of construction. Their names became part of a pattern, workers caught between the demands of a global event and the reality of risk on the ground. On March 21, 2016, federal police entered Odebrecht headquarters with a court order and a list of names. They were not searching for loose cash or simple receipts. They wanted the records of the Setor de Operações Estruturadas, the structured operations sector. Buried in encrypted servers and password-protected files, investigators uncovered a parallel accounting system built to track bribes, not profits. The unit had its own staff, its own software, and a singular purpose: manage illicit payments as carefully as any legitimate business expense. The ledgers revealed a staggering figure: 66 million reais in off-books payments tied to the Arena Corinthians project alone. Each entry was coded, often with nicknames or project codenames like Timão, and cross-referenced to dates that matched contract amendments, procurement phases, and key construction milestones. Payments flowed through offshore companies in the British Virgin Islands, Panama, and Swiss banks, then returned as cash deliveries or wire transfers to intermediaries and officials in Brazil. Some entries linked directly to club executives, others to political allies, all routed through a web of shell firms designed to obscure the money's origin. The documents did not just show isolated bribes, they mapped a system. For every contract increase, a corresponding ledger entry marked out the cut. Testimony from DSO operatives described routine courier deliveries, briefcases exchanged at private homes, and coded emails confirming payment schedules. The scale was industrial. This was not a handful of rogue employees. It was a department with defined roles and monthly targets, operating alongside Odebrecht's legitimate business. The evidence laid bare a machinery of corruption, methodical, organized, and woven into the very fabric of the stadium's construction. The trail of numbers and names would soon expose how procurement, amendments, and cost inflation became tools for siphoning public money, paving the way for the next chapter of the scandal. Antonio Roberto Gavioli, an Odebrecht executive, sat at the center of a strategy that transformed a 335 million reais stadium contract into a 1.25 billion reais windfall. The method was simple on paper, but devastating in practice: contract amendments. Between 2011 and 2014, 47 amendments flowed through the project's bureaucracy. Each was justified by technical language, unexpected soil conditions, design changes, new FIFA requirements, but the underlying purpose was mapped out in internal emails. One message seized by prosecutors carried the phrase, "Encarecer arena," make the arena more expensive. The amendments did more than cover unforeseen costs. They created a legal pathway for money to move, both on the books and off. Odebrecht's structured operations sector tracked these flows with coded entries. One entry in a parallel ledger recorded 500,000 reais, labeled Timão, the club's nickname, authorized during a key phase of procurement. This was not an isolated transaction. Court records confirm a 121,000 euros payment to André Luis de Oliveira, Corinthians' vice president, timed precisely with contract negotiations. The money did not appear as a bank transfer from company to official. It moved through offshore accounts, then arrived as cash, delivered by couriers, logged in encrypted spreadsheets, and matched to amendment dates. Each new amendment meant more money in play, more opportunity for siphoning. The official explanation was always technical necessity, but the internal rationale was profit. The amendments inflated the budget, extended deadlines, and justified the release of additional funds. For every million added to the contract, a portion was carved out for private hands. The paper trail, though coded, was clear enough for investigators to follow. Amendments as the engine, coded payments as the output. The stadium's final price tag, nearly 4 times the original, was less about unforeseen challenges and more about a system designed to extract as much as possible before the final whistle. Andrés Sanchez, former Corinthians president and sitting congressman, became the political face of the stadium's backroom deals. Investigators traced 2.5 million reais in illegal campaign cash, known as Caixa 2, delivered not through wire transfers or official party channels, but as stacks of bills in unmarked briefcases. Witnesses described Odebrecht operatives arriving at the São Paulo home of André Negão, the club's vice president, carrying these briefcases during contract negotiations. The timing was never random. Each delivery lined up with crucial amendment discussions, when a signature could mean millions more for the construction budget. Odebrecht's structured operations sector handled the logistics. Internal ledgers logged the cash drops, coded to avoid detection. The arrangement was simple. Payments flowed, amendments were approved, and the project's cost ballooned. In exchange for this off-books money, club officials agreed to facilitar aditivos contratuais, to smooth the path for each new contract amendment. Every amendment brought new profits for Odebrecht, and every briefcase delivered chipped away at the line between legal negotiation and outright bribery. Sanchez's role was not just ceremonial. As a congressman and power broker, he bridged the worlds of football, construction, and politics. The Caixa 2 scheme turned the stadium into a political machine, with campaign finance law violations fueling the very amendments that drove costs and cut corners on safety. For Odebrecht, the cash drops were a routine expense, calculated into the price of doing business. For the workers on site, each deal behind closed doors meant another risk taken, another safety margin erased. The money that should have paid for better ground testing or a functional crane monitor instead arrived as cash at a politician's doorstep, traded for signatures and silence. Brazilian law requires every crane of this magnitude to operate with a functioning load moment indicator, a digital system that monitors stress, tilt, and overload risk in real time. On the Arena Corinthians site, that safeguard was missing. The Liebherr's data logger had stopped recording in November 2012, more than a year before the collapse. No monthly certifications, no maintenance records, no digital trail. When investigators searched Odebrecht's files, they found nothing but a gap, a full year of silence where there should have been a record of every lift, every warning, every near miss. Engineers on the project later testified that the load moment indicator had been administratively approved. In practice, that meant it was ignored. The device's absence was not a secret. It was a shortcut signed off by managers and left unquestioned by those under pressure to deliver. Union leader Ronaldo warned repeatedly about the risks, especially after heavy rain. He demanded a 48-hour pause to let the ground stabilize. The answer from above was simple: FIFA won't wait. For the crane operator, the message was more direct: proceed with the lift, or lose your job. The consequences of these decisions played out not just in the collapse, but in the months that followed. On March 29, 2014, as the stadium rushed to install temporary seating for the World Cup opening, another worker, Fabio Hamilton da Cruz, fell 7 meters from an unfinished tribune. He died in the hospital, the 3rd fatality at Arena Corinthians, and the 8th among Brazil's World Cup venues. The pattern was clear: warnings ignored, safety systems bypassed, deadlines enforced at any cost. Each shortcut taken for profit or speed transferred risk from executive offices to the men on the ground. The real cost of every bribe and every shortcut was measured not in balance sheets, but in lives lost. One more name added to a list that should never have existed. On April 2nd, 2018, a São Paulo court delivered its verdict on the Arena Corinthians disaster. 2 engineers, José Antonio Goncalves and Marcio Antunes Fernandes, stood accused of negligent homicide for failing to uphold technical regulations on site. Their sentences, 4 months and 15 days, were immediately converted to community service and a safety course. Fines were assessed at the equivalent of 30 minimum wages. Neither man saw a day in prison. The court named no Odebrecht executive, no club official, no procurement manager. The architects of the system that enabled the collapse were untouched by criminal conviction. The financial fallout, by contrast, continues to shape the daily reality of Corinthian supporters. The stadium's original budget of 335 million reais ballooned to 1.25 billion reais in principal, then passed 2 billion reais with accumulated interest. As of December 2024, the club's financial records list nearly 2 billion reais still owed, with the bulk of repayments scheduled through the 2030s. That month, the Gaviões de Fiel supporter group organized their 3rd major payment campaign, raising funds to cover a critical 50 to 60 million reais installment. Fans contributed through crowdfunding drives, ticket surcharges, and merchandise sales. Ordinary people paying down debt created by decisions far beyond their control. This burden is not unique to São Paulo. Across Brazil, the legacy of World Cup construction lingers in empty or underused stadiums and spiraling public debt. Mané Garrincha, built for 1.9 billion reais, hosts occasional concerts and government events, rarely filling its seats for football. Manaus Arena Amazonia, surrounded by rainforest, averages just 1,200 spectators per match. Built for 4 World Cup games, it is now a monument to wasted opportunity. These white elephants stand as silent evidence of promises broken and money misused. The contrast is stark. Engineers who signed off on flawed procedures faced community service and fines, while those who authorized budget inflation, the contract amendments, and the illicit payments remain unscathed. The cost of impunity is measured not only in lost lives, but in decades of debt, paid year after year by those with the least power to prevent it. Today, Arena Corinthians still carries over 2 billion reais in debt, its shadow stretching across every ticket and every fan. As Brazil prepares new mega-projects, the same contractors and officials remain at the table. The real risk isn't just another collapse, but a cycle where profit outweighs safety, and where memory fades before accountability arrives. The cost isn't buried in concrete, it is measured in lives still unpaid.